This lesson is working with the ArrayList class. Now, an ArrayList is a built-in class in .NET. It's under the System.Collections namespace. We can dynamically size this one at runtime, which is kind of cool. Remember how hard it was to add and remove items from an array? Well, now we can dynamically size this, so that makes it very easy to add and remove elements. Each element of the array list can hold different data types. Now, that may seem like it's kind of cool, but this could actually be a potential problem. So I would suggest that you strive to only put similar data types into one array list object. All right, let's take a look at creating an array list. Now, the array list, as I mentioned, is located under the System.Collections namespace in .NET. So we must use a using to bring in that namespace so that we can use the array list. An alternative would be to fully qualify the array list with the namespace .className, as you can see here. So either way works just fine. So then we create an array list. I named it ARR equals new. And then we can do a console.writeLine on that count to see what's in there so far. Then I'm going to do on line 7, another console.writeLine. And then I'm going to add a bunch of elements. Now look how easy this is. I didn't have to loop through and create a whole nother array. I simply do ARR.add. And then I add the numeric 1. Then I do an ARR.add. And then I add a string. And another add with a true, and another add with a datetime.now, which gives me the current date and time. Now, as I mentioned, this isn't the best practice because we now have different types in each element of this array list. It's better just to keep one data type within an array list, but there's no way to enforce it, unfortunately. But once I have all those items in there, I can iterate over them, doing a for each, and display each one. And I can also then at the very end see the count that's now in the array list. So if we run this, we'll see 0. Then we see each of the items that I put in, and then we see how many are now in the current array list. Instead of using all of those individual add statements like we did there, let's change this up a little bit. Because what I can do now is I can simply initialize it like this. Array list ARR equals new. Then within curly braces, I can, just like I initialize properties of a class, I can now initialize the elements that I want in the array list. 1, comma, and then a string, 10-speed bicycle, comma, a true, comma, and then datetime.now. If we run this, we get the exact same results as before. We get the list of the things that are in there, and we get the number of items in the array list. So just two different ways to initialize and declare array lists. Let's now take a look at manipulating data in the array list. After creating our array list, on line 11, you can see I'm going to change that second item within the array list from 10-speed bicycle to brake pad. So ARR subscript 1 is equal to a brake pad. That's very similar to the way that we did it with an array. If we then run this, we see that, yes, indeed, that second item in there has been changed. Remember, everything's 0 based in .NET. Now, if we want to remove an item, so let's say we want to remove an element, we can simply do ARR.removeAt. And we can give it an element number. So we could remove the second element, for example. So if we now do that and run that, you can see that that true value has gone away, because 2 means the third element, right? Another way to do it is you can use a remove, and then you have to know the data type that you want to remove and what it looks like. So in this case, 10-speed bicycle. Or I could do true. Okay, but either way, the remove says, give me something that I can match on exactly within the array list, and I will go ahead and remove that item. If we now run this, we see it didn't remove. Why? I don't know if you noticed it, but there's a typo on line 5, and I actually spelled it correctly down here on line 11. So like I said, and I did this on purpose to show you that if you don't get it right, it's not going to remove that item. It's got to match up exactly. So now let's run this, and now that item does indeed go away. In this lesson, we learned about arrays and array lists. An array helps you gather related items together. It's really best used for small amounts of data. And remember that it can be kind of difficult to add and remove items from arrays. Now, ArrayList, boy, much easier to manipulate that data, much less code, but it's not strongly typed, so it can be a little bit error prone. If you're careful in using it, it can be an effective tool. Coming up in our next lesson, working with properties and methods of strings.